In today's episode of Cyber Stories, I'm going to be interviewing Zack Allen, who is the Director of Security Detection and Research at Datadog. I'm actually a security engineer on his team, so I am practically interviewing my boss in this video. And at the very end of this video, I'll be asking him why he hired me. Why did you hire me? To see what he says. That being said, let's get into the video. Hey Zach, how's it going?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, Day?
Doing alright. How's the weather out there?
Just started raining, so I'm stuck indoors in the basement. But that would be the same thing even if it were sunny outside. So
Gotcha,
yeah,
gotcha. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I know it's been a long time coming, but I'm super excited to have you on here. I think you have a lot of perspective experience that will be very beneficial to my subscribers, especially at your level. So I'm
hmm
definitely excited to get into this conversation and just see how it goes.
yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited. I subbed to your channel. It's one of the first things I learned about you, and we'll probably get into that a little bit later. But I'm
Yeah,
excited to be here.
awesome, awesome. So let's just get right into it. So let's get started with how you actually got into cybersecurity. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I'll age myself a little bit, but I was a '90s kid, and so my first internet connection was on like AOL 4.0 when I was like 7 or 8, and then from there, back in those days, I guess knowledge wasn't as accessible as it is now. So you had to really go out and look for things like how to hack
Hmm.
computers, how to do networking, how to code, and eventually I made my way into chat rooms on AOL and IRC, and then I just started learning like, hey, what is this coding thing? Can I do more of it? And then I found a really good intersection between coding and cheating at video games. And so I wanted to cheat at online video games, not just like plug in a cheat code and I'm playing Grand Theft Auto, like literally go and win because I'm cheating.
Right.
So that's how I got started. If anyone ever played Diablo 2, I cheated a lot at that and wrote cheats for it, StarCraft, things like that. And then when I got into college, I was lucky enough to go to a school that had a degree called Information Security and Forensics. And this was 2008. And I chose that and just haven't really looked back since.
Yeah, that sounds like a very interesting way to get into cybersecurity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sounds good. So between that, your days of like cheating on these games and getting into becoming a director at Datadog, what did that journey look like from then to now?
Yeah, a lot of I tried a lot of things and I failed at a lot of things, and every time I kind of came back to my strengths, it really just kind of pointed out to like, hey, maybe I can do take these skills and do it for good.
Mm,
And so, graduating school, I had a lot of access to classes to computer networking, systems administration, red teaming, things like that. And this was like I said, 2008 to 2012, so
right.
really ahead of its time. I worked for the Department of Defense for a little bit. I got put out of a job because I was changing jobs to go work for the government, and I got a call from the recruiter that said, "Hey, this guy Edward Snowden, like, is doing all this stuff, and he stole all these secrets. So we're not hiring right now." And I already moved, so I live in the DC area. So I'm like, "Well, crap, I got to do something." Found a startup, and then from there I realized like, hey, this is really fun from the business perspective and the security perspective, and I think I can merge those two things together. And I've been kind of pursuing leadership ever since, but I've always kind of come back to like that, got to make sure to stay like really sharp,
Yeah.
because people like you and your subscribers are coming up in way more than I did at your age, and your guys' age. Even in high school, it's really crazy. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's definitely been a lot of moving in between jobs, trying a couple different things and not liking it, but really just making sure I stick to my strengths.
Awesome. That definitely sounds good. And yeah, like that's definitely something that I want to go into later on because even at the director level, you still stay very sharp with your skills. You're still very hands on the keyboard. So I think that's definitely something that I want to get into later on. But
Sure.
before we go into that, I think we might have skipped this at the beginning. But
Yeah.
do you want to introduce yourself and just tell us like who
Sure.
you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Zack Allen. I'm the director of security detection and research here at Datadog. I run or help run the organization that basically takes our cloud security products and make sure that they're up to date to find the latest threats and vulnerabilities in our customers' environments. So everything I do is making sure I can hire the right people, give them the tools they need, and get the hell out of the way. But also make sure that anytime something comes up, like you're blocked or there's something preventing you from doing something, I'm there to basically provide air cover and make sure that I can take any obstacles out of the way.
Definitely. That sounds a lot like what I know you do every
Yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so speaking of that, now that you are at a director level, which is like 3 or 4 levels above me, you're managing multiple teams. Compared to when you first started out, how has your perspective changed on the way the cybersecurity is and, what it takes to actually get into the industry?
Yeah, so I think when I first became like a security engineer, I thought I knew all the answers because I knew security. I knew
Mm,
what it meant to be secure. I knew what it meant to be insecure, and just I was very hell bent on making sure to tell people like this is what's going wrong and this is what you're doing wrong. That doesn't work for that long. You'll make a lot of enemies pretty quickly, and what I mean by that is you're not necessarily paid as a security engineer to be right. You're paid to help people go in a direction that is the least painful as possible and to prevent any type of really crazy risk from happening at your company. So instead of yelling at somebody for having a weak password, now I look at it and say like, well, what controls were put in place to give them the ability to set a weak password? And that's usually our fault. It's not their fault, it's our fault, right? And so I think that's like the biggest perspective I've learned is that the business is going to do what the business does, and it's almost like a ship in the ocean. We can go on and we could jump up and down and just say all these things about what's wrong with the ship, but it's still going somewhere, and it's better
mhm.
to just help get to where it needs to go rather than try to stop everybody all the time and blocking them from doing their day job.
Yeah. And I think that perspective is like you're saying, it shifted from, the users or the people who are responsible for this kind of thing are at fault to, what could I have done differently to ensure that this didn't actually happen, rather than shifting the blame or, pointing to what they did, regardless of, in comparison to what you could have done or had in
Mhm.
place to prevent that from happening.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it's the faster or the faster you can make that shift in your career, like early on. I feel like the more successful you'll start to notice all the things that you're working on like become. So, for example, if you kind of come in and you're a know-it-all, or you're saying like, "Oh, everyone's doing everything wrong," it seems like everything's a dumpster fire. And I like to
Mm,
think of security as just all of these dumpster fires that we all have to deal with. The best thing you could do is prioritize those dumpster fires and just hit them one at a time. And if
mm,
you can do that, management notices really quickly, your stakeholders know it really quickly, the businesses notice it really quickly, and you just kind of turn into somebody that's like very helpful.
mm.
Um, but if all you do is kind of point out problems, it's not really that helpful.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and like it really points to a video I'll be releasing like later on about if you're the person like just who just likes to complain, nobody wants to really deal with you. But that's a
Mhm.
very interesting perspective on that. In that regards, right, based off of how your perspective has changed and how you operate now, as you're growing in your career, if you were to start all over again, what would that roadmap look like in order to get to where you are at right now?
Yeah. So this is a pretty hard question. Um, I think for me, what I would have changed is I probably would have figured out a better way to check my ego. I think, going back to the point we just made, ego's always a big problem, and it's totally okay for you to be wrong. And I think there are times where I was just so hell bent on being right or proving someone right that it didn't actually help me in the long run, or didn't even help me in the short run. It's kind of like that age old like adage of like you're not wrong, you're just an asshole, right?
Right.
So by finding a way to check my ego and to say like, am I introducing bias into this? Am I really just like putting blinders on and only focusing on one thing? I probably wouldn't have burned as many bridges as I have in my career.
Mm,
And I probably would have gotten here a little bit faster, but it's kind of hard to look back and say like, would that have actually really, really helped me? But that
yeah.
would be one thing I would change, would be like, make sure to put things in place to check my ego.
Yeah, and I think like that's something that is like that might apply to so many people because I think cybersecurity in general is a really egotistical field where
Yes.
people, can easily have, high egos based off of like, their abilities or where they're at, or even maybe even money they're earning. So it's
Mhm.
understandable that, that could have happened. And, in hindsight, definitely something that someone who is getting into the industry or just coming up could definitely keep in mind in regards to that.
Yeah, yeah. And like, and here's the thing, that personality, it could work. It
Mm,
could absolutely work in security, and it exists.
yeah.
I would say it's a lot less now than it was 10 years ago, but sometimes you are paid to be that person that is right, and you're
Yeah.
so good at it. You're like the LeBron James, right?
Yeah.
Of being that. The
Yeah.
problem is only a handful of people can be that.
That's
Like if you
true.
look at this as like a distribution here, you're probably not going to be all the way over there, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. So with your skill level and like all the years of experience you have, one would probably imagine that you have a ton of certifications. But contrary to that, I barely see any certifications on your LinkedIn profile, except maybe you're hiding them or or
none,
something. But in
none.
that regards, like what's your take on certifications as they relate to cybersecurity?
um so there's this meme in the security world that like there are people that hunt certifications and list all of them, and like you'll get somebody with certifications like 3 or 4 lines afterwards.
Yeah.
And then people tend to say bad things about them. My response to that is, I think that they can be useful as long as they get you in the door,
Mm,
as long as it's something where you could say, from once I started this search to the end, I've learned something, and my probability of getting into the door or getting that interview and being able to talk about a certain subject, if that's worth it, then do it.
mm,
What I will also say is that there are times when I'm, let's just say, interviewing, or I'm looking at resumes, and I've looked at thousands and thousands of resumes at this point. I will say there are certification hunters, and it's almost like an achievement system, right? They're
yeah.
like, if I get all 20 of these, then I'll get the interview. But what I notice is that a lot of the times they just kind of regurgitate information. And
Mm,
I look for somebody that is almost like a tinkerer. Like they use the certification to get a basic fundamental understanding of something. And then they went in and they did something really interesting or different with that.
yes.
I think that's the useful thing. I don't
Yes.
think regurgitating information is going to be that useful.
I love that answer because that is exactly what I do, right? Because it's like, for me, a certification is a means to an end, a means to
Mhm.
gain certain knowledge that I might not have, and also have a structured way of it, because that's what certifications do. They give
Mhm.
you like a boundary for this knowledge, that these are all the things you have to learn in order to like be certified as. For example, let's say the AWS Certified Security Specialty. This is what
Mhm.
AWS thinks you need to know as a certified AWS security specialty professional, whatever
Mhm.
that is. And the point is not to like just get this badge of hunter that determines me as this name, but the
Yeah.
goal is like, in the course of this journey to get the certification, I've learned this and this, and I'm able to actually apply that knowledge, right? And that's what something I
Mhm.
really try to bring into like the work I do. If I'm going for a certification, I look at it as, okay, is this going to bring me any value in terms of what I'm doing and what I want to do in the future, and how can
Yeah.
I take these things that I'm doing and actually apply them at work or for whatever I want to do in the future, rather than just like taking it as like something that I'm just like collecting and collecting just for the sake of it. So I really love that answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I might have to get like a CISP soon if I want to keep going along this path. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like I like that you said it's structured. And
Mm,
I think the biggest problem that I see people getting into security is their ability to structure the way they learn.
hmm.
And you can do that. The way I did it was, I was like, well, I just want to play video games and cheat
Yeah.
and shoot people and always get headshots. And so the way I structured learning that was that goal in mind. And
Mm,
that's what kept it interesting.
yeah.
You don't have to get certifications to be structured, but the way sort of some certs are laid out can introduce that structure to you. And then you just can take that and reapply it to other subject areas. That I think is also really useful.
Definitely, definitely, absolutely. I love that perspective. So on the other hand, you of course like went to college, and I'm pretty sure you had a good experience. As a matter of fact, I think your college is probably one of the colleges that produces like top talent in cybersecurity based off like the alumni that I've seen
Mm-hmm.
from that college. So what is your opinion on on degrees and college in general, especially now
Yeah.
that people are able to get into the industry without having a college degree?
Yeah, so I'll let you know a dirty secret about RIT. The thing that produces the top talent is Not necessarily the degree, but it's the situations, the social and networking situations that the degree puts you into.
Hmm.
Um, there is a club at RIT called RIT and
Yeah.
that club has like 200 active members, all in undergrad, and they have 4 sub clubs in there. They do all kinds of stuff. That's where all the learning really happens. And
Hmm.
like I said before, college, just like certs, it teaches you how to learn. Yeah, it's going to give you fundamentals. You may get into some advanced topics, especially if you go for a grad degree. But these undergrads are coming in, they're getting structure, and then they're like, well, I learned about this in class. Let me go tinker with this with a bunch of my classmates
Hmm.
who also learned about this in this club. And they spend hours and hours and hours working on it. Then they're just like, well, I think let's just do a CTF now. And now they're doing CTFs. Let's do a security competition. They're doing security competitions. So like college is just the baseline. It's that
Yeah.
social, it's that networking, it's the project based work that you're doing is kind of what really catapults you into everything else that like makes you really successful in a security career.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm actually subscribed to the RIT YouTube channel, and I
Yeah,
see all like the presentations, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like, I
they're
wish I
insane.
got to do.
Yeah,
It's amazing. I'm like, you guys do this in college. I wish
yeah,
I got to do this in college, right? Because like
yeah.
I'm seeing projects like Terraform, cloud security, malware analysis. I'm like, this
Hmm.
is freaking amazing. And they present it like, and they show what they worked on, what they learned, all of that. And I think it's amazing. I think it would be great to have other colleges implement that into like their cybersecurity curriculum, because that practical experience you get, and also having that community of people,
Hmm.
and even alumni like yourself who are able to see like these students are actually putting in the work. They know what they're talking about. They have the
Hmm.
practical skills because they're building things. They're working on a lot of projects. And it really goes to market these students as good candidates for employers as they come out of college, rather than just people who go to college, get a generic cybersecurity degree but don't have any practical
Hmm.
experience or skills to back that up.
Yeah, if I had to go back, or if I had someone come up to me and say, should I go to this program, I think I would ask them 2 questions. Curriculum aside,
Mm,
one, what is the community there? Are there clubs that you can socialize with, that you can network? Because a lot of the people that were in my club 12 years ago, they're now CISOs and
mm,
directors or principal engineers, and I can hit them up for anything, anytime. So that would be the first question. The second question is there a requirement to do a paid internship before you graduate?
mm,
So at RIT, we call these co-ops. And for me to graduate from RIT, I had to do 3 paid internships in security before they would give me a degree. A lot of other schools are now following this model. But what's really interesting is that I can look at a fresh graduate from RIT that has worked at Google, at Mandiant, at CrowdStrike, Cloudflare, name any security company, and they already have like 2 years worth of experience. They
yep.
just spent some time doing that during their semester. So that's another thing too. I would say for somebody considering a college is look for anyone that forces a requirement for you to do a paid internship, and the college doesn't like leave you to do that. They actually have a lot of scaffolding in place to
Mm.
everything from career fairs to alumni. They really market their students to get those internships.
Yeah, no, I totally love it. So, in regards to that, as a hiring manager, and I'm pretty sure you've done a lot of hiring, like you said, you've looked at over a thousand, like thousands of resumes at this point.
Mm-hmm.
When you're looking at that, that fresher, like out of college, someone who's just come out of college, they're looking for their first security engineering job. What are
Mm-hmm.
some projects or some things that you've seen that was like this? I want this guy, or actually, I at least want to interview this guy for
Yeah.
someone who wants to get into the field. What are some projects you've seen?
Yeah. So the best way to answer this is that when I look at a resume, I look for impact. And
Mm,
what kind of impact did you have on a business or an end user or the open source community? Um, so I don't. If I see a resume and their skill, you go down to skills and it says Kali Linux, Nmap. Like that
yeah.
doesn't really tell me anything. It just tells me that maybe you watched a YouTube video and you ran a couple commands on your keyboard. But if I see something that says I implemented a project to enforce, let's just say, secure by default S3 buckets when
Mm,
someone commits code, that's interesting because you thought about like, hey, what is the actual business impact of something that's insecure? you're not looking for insecure buckets, you're preventing them from happening in the first place, and you're thinking about the actual end customer of this and what the impact will be. I would rather talk to that person than anybody that just kind of says like, hey, I did some pen testing, but like on Hack the Box or something. It's just you focus on really what matters, which is like the business, and you can show that either through open source, security conferences, student organizations, or internships.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a really good answer. And I recently made a video about like brainstorming for cybersecurity projects, and one of the main points I made was solve a problem, right? Like, what is there
Hmm.
a problem around you or problem that you see? Just make a project out of solving that problem, and it would be way better than just like doing something random or just going on, whatever platform and just like doing random things. Right? The application of the skill you're learning or like the problem you're solving is like what it essentially helps you build that knowledge you're looking for, because that's what you're
Hmm.
going to be doing when you get into the real world, right? So
Hmm.
there are going to be problems you have to solve, and you're going to have to think outside the box, look for resources. And if a hiring manager can see that you've done this on your own without having any sort of guidance or having anyone tell you to do it, then it's more incentive to want to have a conversation with you and see you as someone who could potentially work and solve problems at their
Hmm.
organization.
Yeah, yeah, and to add on to this, the one thing I also look for, people talk about culture fits. I hate it when people talk about hiring for a culture fit. I look
Mm.
for a culture add. So what can you
Mm.
bring to the table that we don't have? And what's unique about this specific thing is that sometimes like this isn't always security related. It could be like almost security adjacent. So for example, if you worked a help desk job, you have so much perspective on being an end user and solving end user problems. I will almost always talk to somebody who's been like a help desk admin.
Mm.
Same thing with a SOC analyst. So a SOC analyst, you made your first entry into cybersecurity, and you're in the trenches. You
Yeah.
know this because you were a SOC
Yeah.
analyst, right?
Yeah.
You were in the trenches. You dealt with all of the tools that I probably wrote that my team or my even myself included has published about how I solved this problem. You're like, Zach, you didn't solve this problem. Like I used that tool and it didn't work. Like
Yeah.
I look for that perspective as a culture add, and it doesn't always have to be security related too. So if you can kind of somehow bridge your perspective on solving issues for like an end user into security, even though you don't have security experience, that's something that will almost always get a call from me.
Yeah. No, I totally love that answer. And I mean, ultimately, as engineers, security, or whatever the case is, our goal is to solve problems, right? And to
Hmm.
bring what we have to the table, and help the business, achieve the business goal. So I think it's a really, really good insight on that. Right now, at this point in your career or over the course of your career, what have been your favorite books or activities to you do to keep
Hmm.
yourself sharp, right? To books you read or maybe things you do in your own free time to ensure that you still retain your skill, even though you might spend a lot of time doing management stuff, but you're still
Hmm.
very hands on keyboard. What are some things that you do to keep that skill and also retain the fundamentals that are going to continuously be applied over and over and over again?
Yeah. So probably there's like two things here, one on the technical side and one just on the knowledge base side and what's going on in the world. The short answer for the knowledge base is I run a newsletter, and this newsletter forces me to really study what's going on in the world. It's called Detection Engineering Weekly, and what's going on in the world when it comes to threat detection, detection engineering, threat hunting. What are the latest techniques? What are the latest tools? What are threat actors doing? And I was looking for a newsletter that did this for me, and I couldn't find it. So now I use that as a way to kind of funnel all of this knowledge and article reading in one spot. And this is like 6 to 8 hours of reading per week on just news articles, GitHub repos, stuff like that. So that's one of them. The other part is more on the technical side. I try to code anywhere between 4 to 12 hours a week. Um, that's taken a hit ever since I've had a kid and I'm back in grad school right now. But I always have projects that I'm working on, and I always have things I'm working on to make sure that like I can align security goals with things that I'm interested in, and I can stay technical. So I'm still writing a lot of code, deploying a lot of infrastructure. Um, I do some threat actor tracking on the side. Like I might tweet about some stuff every once in a while. So those are
Yeah.
kind of like the two things that helps me.
Yeah, that's definitely good. And one thing, I'm having a brain fart right now. There was something you said, and I just totally blanked out.
It's
I totally
okay.
blanked out. Oh yeah, so yeah, actually, so speaking of detection engineering weekly, how did that start? Right, because like it's I've been following it like from the start. Right, I actually even knew about it before it was started out. So
I know, I
um,
know. I
and
came to you for some help and feedback. So
no, yeah, it's amazing, and it's grown so fast. Really, like it's over 1,000 subscribers now. So, how did
yeah,
that idea come up to be, and how has that been? Tracking all these things because you make a very well curated list of like things that apply to detection engineering, be it cloud or even outside of cloud. So, how did this start? And like, what was like that? What led to it essentially?
yeah. So detection engineering is a very new thing. I know, like you've talked about this on your channel. I want to say last 5 years, maybe, and really the last 2 years, I've seen it kind of explode in popularity. It's this culmination of coding, statistics, and being a computer hacker, and that's kind of like how I define it. And I needed a place to just read about it. And I could find a couple blogs here and there. And I sent out a tweet one day asking, like, hey, is there anyone that has like a newsletter or a collection of knowledge that is regularly updated where I can just stay up to date on this? Because like I have this pain point and no one's been able to solve it. Um, and then afterwards, I talked with actually a few people here. I talked with Nick, who works at Datadog. I talked with Uday. I talked with Christoph, another person at Datadog. I'm like, I think I should just write a newsletter. I had a couple drinks one weekend and I was just kind of on Google domains and just kind of typing in a bunch of stuff. And
Yeah.
I found one, detectionengineering.net. And I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Like most of my domains I've bought when I'm under, a few drinks. but um, but yeah, it kind of started there, and I was like, if I get to 100 subscribers, this would be awesome, and I'll get my friends to do it, and it's just going to force me to stay up on the news. And my goal was just to give it to the team at Datadog.
Mm.
What I didn't know is that I would just publish a few things, and everyone started to reach out to me saying how great it was, and they gave me awesome feedback. I even had a few haters in there that said it sucked and I should quit, so that motivated me even more. And yeah, within a few months, I think 2 months we hit 1,000 subscribers. I'm about to hit 1,500,
That's
and
amazing.
now, yeah, it just keeps going and going. So really, it kind of comes down back to what you said, Day. There's a problem. I wanted to solve that problem because there wasn't anyone solving it for me, and I did
Hmm.
something, and then it just kind of blew up, and now it's really taking off.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love it. I think again, like you said, solving problems, and if you don't have a problem to solve someone else's problem, right?
Hmm.
So I definitely love that, and I'll leave a link to Detection Engineering Weekly in the description. I definitely recommend subscribing to it. Really, really well curated, and gives you everything you need to understand what is going on in terms of detection engineering in this current landscape. So yeah, you mentioned that you do a little bit of like threat actor tracking on the
Hmm.
side. But again, you've had a pretty extensive career. What are some interesting attacks or interesting breaches or compromises or things you've dealt with,
Hmm.
as a practitioner in the field, and also what you do on the side as well?
Yeah. Um,
I'm sure you've seen a lot of interesting things.
yeah, yeah. Um, one thing, one really interesting engagement I worked on in my last company. So I was the senior director of threat intelligence at a company called Zero Fox, and we specialize in cybercrime. And I really like tracking cybercrime threat actors because one, they can be kind of sloppy, and you can see a lot of progress with like defending against them rather than a nation state. But two, they're very innovative, and they iterate really fast, much like a startup. So we had a way at my last company where we can go and query the whole internet and find Cobalt Strike C2 servers. And we could cross correlate that with something called global net flow data. So we had a separate data provider that basically got net flow of the whole internet. And we can see, hey, this Cobalt Strike server is talking to this IP address owned by one of our customers. And so we get on the phone and we tell them, and they freak out because we're like, listen, Cobalt Strike is already on this server. You're about to get ransomware. And we basically handled it in a way such that we were able to get access to that Cobalt Strike or beacon on that infected server, and we kicked the threat actors out, and we delivered that server and the compromised network to the customer, and they coordinated a complete quarantine and started an incident response process. So it was like a 1-2 punch,
Hmm.
and that was just like a really cool thing because we also knew that it was about to get ransomware because we found the person selling access to it on the dark web. And so we could talk to the threat actor, and that's one thing we did in my last company. We would glean intelligence by talking to threat actors, and we knew that he was very close to a sale, and so we knew we had to pull the trigger or they're about to get ransomware. So we prevented a ransomware incident, I think.
No, that
Yeah,
that sounds absolutely amazing. Like that
yeah,
sounds like a scene out of a movie. Actually, like it's
yeah.
it sounds really interesting. And
If you
yeah,
ever want to do like something separate on the dark web, I can tell you some crazy stuff that's happened, and I could also demystify a lot of it because it's really like it really isn't as cool as people say it is, but the parts that are cool are really really interesting.
yeah.
So
No,
yeah,
I imagine like you should like after this you should just like go work for like a movie company and just like give them story ideas
yeah, I don't know
for
about
stuff like
that.
that.
Yeah,
But yeah, that sounds very, very interesting. But let's talk about cloud security a little bit, right? So,
sure.
you have a lot of experience in cloud security space. We currently work at a cloud security company. It's the new hotness. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's doing
Hmm.
it. Everyone wants to associate themselves with something cloud, whether or not they really do
Hmm.
cloud or not. But given this new hotness, what does the cyber threat landscape look for it as organizations are starting to adopt the cloud more and more?
Yeah. So at least from a threat perspective, the way I like to look at any type of when I look at any type of like threat actor or groups of people that are attacking people in the cloud, I first do what's called a victimology analysis. Who has been attacked and what has been successful that we know about? And so a lot of the times, what I see is like two buckets: opportunistic hacks and really deep nation state hacks. There's like really nothing in the middle right now. So an opportunistic hack could be something like um, the basics. Is this company doing the basics in cloud security? Do they have a secure like service control policy in AWS, or do they have 2FA turned on for their single sign-on in Azure, things like that? Many compromises stem from these basics, and it's because these companies are switching from on-prem to the cloud. You'll hear people say digital transformation, which is kind of like the marketing term for it, and so I see a lot of the kind of cyber crime related threat actors abusing the basics. On the other side, the really interesting stuff with nation states to me in the cloud is really how can a nation state get in and stay? And a lot of the attacks I'm seeing is related to supply chain as it relates to the cloud. So attacking CI/CD systems, attacking code repositories, um, all different types of ways that you can say like I need to persist at multiple parts of the cloud from dev all the way to production, and the thing that touches that the most is the code that people write.
Hmm. That's definitely an interesting perspective. And I remember you wrote a blog titled Detection Engineering Table Stakes. And I think that's probably
Hmm.
one of your popular blogs ever. And you talked
Hmm.
about the history of the industry where you used like vivid analogies of like these security elders and security wizards from the
Hmm.
past. And they would talk to you about a time, when vulnerability scanners, those rules were like the only thing that mattered. And I'm
Yep.
sure you've definitely seen a lot, coming a long way from there. And also, like you said, with all this digital transformation. So,
Hmm.
as you've seen the industry evolve over time, across these different changes in the security industry and with tools and with the cloud as well, how do you
Hmm.
see the future of cloud security and detection engineering as a whole?
Hmm. Ooh, this is a really hard question, Day. um. So there's a few things. At least for the future of cloud security, I don't think I would say Solar Winds was like pretty close when it comes to cloud security in terms of like our oh crap moment. Like we should take this seriously. I think there's probably another major breach that's really going to change the paradigm that people are thinking when it comes to cloud security. I could point to a few in the past, whether it's like the Capital One breach, Solar Winds, things like that. But I think until we see a massive ransomware and nation state attack happening on like an AWS tenant or an Azure tenant or something like that, people are still going to say like, yeah, it's important, but we still have all this other crap we're worried about on prem. So that's where I kind of see it going. Now, from a detection engineering perspective, there's kind of like two fields that I'm starting to see kind of come closer together. And it's really that on hosts, kind of Windows event log type of good old fashioned threat detection, and then what we're trying to build here in cloud. And what I think what the cloud people are doing better right now is I think we're starting to look at how people have done a lot of these types of large log management systems and alerting systems from developers and site reliability engineers. Basically, what I mean by that is that we're starting to learn lessons from what people have been doing for like years and years and years. And then we kind of throw a new name on it and call it our own, but it's really just like the same stuff. So
Hmm.
I see detection engineers becoming more and more dev heavy over time. And they're gonna have a security specialty, but it's not going to be the mainstay of what makes them useful. What's going to make them useful is that they're going to be devs.
Hmm. Interesting. And what role would they play in ensuring an organization's cloud security? Because I'm sure organizations have different teams that do different things, right? Of course, they might
Mm-hmm.
have like cloud controls team, maybe even a cloud pen testing team. But
Mm-hmm.
what role will the detection engineers play in ensuring the organization's cloud security?
Yeah, so there's this really great blog on detection engineering and threat detection in general by Jared Atkinson called The Funnel of Fidelity. And the way it works is that detection engineering is part of like a funnel of potential security events. And what they do is they're really good at collecting a lot of disparate data sources, normalizing it, and then working with stakeholders like a SOC or an internal response team or a cloud security team to say what matters to you. And so they have these internal customers. And so what the detection engineering team really wants to do is take as much pain away from incident response, from threat hunting, from pen testing, all of those teams, so that when they give work to somebody as a result of one of their rules, that work is like time well spent. If you get into yourself into a place where you're wasting people's time, they stop looking at the alerts. And once they stop looking at the alerts, one's going to get through that's going to be an actual real security incident and it's going to be missed.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. And that kind of also ties into, at Datadog, we kind of have something called the detection engineering lifecycle. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of where the ideation phase comes in, where we're kind of getting, ideas from like, incident response, pen testing, whatever the case is. And we use those data points to determine how we prioritize the detection we want to build, and, expand our coverage for our cloud environments. But that's definitely
Yeah.
good insight.
Yeah. And, I'm sure you've seen me type a bunch in Slack and on meetings about all kinds of like different ways to do efficacy and all the inputs. And it's one of the many reasons why I really like this field. It's very dynamic. There's a lot of inputs, and if you want to be a threat hunter for a week, you can do that because it's actually useful as a detection engineer. If you want to be a
Hmm.
pen tester, you can do that because it's important for you to understand how to attack things in order to how to defend. So
Yes.
um, it definitely is. Every day is interesting.
Yeah, no,
So
100% agree with that. Yeah, every day of my work is interesting. There's
yeah,
always
yeah.
something new to do. Like I could just like never run out of things to do.
I know all dumpster fires, right? But you're good at
Yeah,
prioritizing them, so that's why you're
absolutely.
successful here. So.
Yeah. And you yourself, like you sound like someone who you don't just sound like someone who is really busy. You are someone who is very busy. Like you manage multiple teams, like a lot of individuals, and you have other things you do as well, right? And you're also a family man as well.
Mhm.
How do you kind of balance everything you do, and not get burnt out, and also be able to like be effective and efficient across everything that you do?
Um, I don't have a silver bullet answer for this because I'm still trying things out. But
Mm,
what I will say, what has helped is really start getting comfortable with scheduling and really abiding by that schedule. I'm a very schedule oriented person. And so if I scheduled in my run today from 12 to 12:30, I scheduled in rock climbing the other day, I'll schedule in jujitsu. Um, I schedule in times where I'm like, this is only for my family, that kind of thing. So that helps. The other thing too, and this is kind of like a hack that I like to tell people, is I don't forget anything. and I
Mm.
don't forget anything because I write it all down. So if anyone ever asks me for anything, I open an app. I use Todoist, and there's plenty of others that you can use. And even if it's the most mundane thing, I say, "Day asked this question. Remember to look this up and answer by this." And 3 times a day during my workday, I go to my to-do list, I reprioritize it, I look at things that were due today, and I just start checking them off one by one. Um, that's really worked out for me because it does give this idea that like you're reliable and you don't miss
Mm.
anything. But there's absolutely no way I would be able to do this if I didn't put it down somewhere other than my head.
Yeah, no, you and I are
Hmm.
very similar in that regards because I use Notion for everything, right? I
Hmm.
literally plan out everything like I need to do when they're due, if I've done them, if I need to reprioritize them, and also like of course, using like my calendar to schedule things.
Hmm.
But I think like
Yeah.
that prioritization and knowing what you're doing at every point in time, so that you don't miss things and you kind of have a grip over your day is like really important because like things can just like fly the day could just fly by really fast and you
Yeah.
just miss things and and there's a lot going on, so being able to kind of have, because your brain can only hold so much, but being able to
Hmm.
like offload that to something else makes it definitely a lot more easier until maybe you get an assistant
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
The one thing I'll say here too is you still can get burnout from doing what we're discussing. So you also
mm,
have to schedule in things where um, you can relax or you can do something that has nothing to do with security. I like this concept. I've heard it called the fourth place. So you have 3 places in your life: work, family, and maybe like a hobby or something like that, or like extended family. You're always spending time in these 3 places. You should actively choose a fourth place that has nothing to do with the first three and
mm,
just go and do that. And so for me, that's jujitsu and climbing, for example. I can go to jujitsu. No one's talking to me about security. No one's talking to me about business. No one's talking to me about, OKRs or anything like that. Right. I'm just there as like a person that's the same as the person next to me. Same thing with rock climbing. That has relieved a lot of pressure in my life to relax because I could just go to a place and almost be anonymous, but not really anonymous. Right. I'm still doing something and interacting and socializing.
yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Definitely agree with that. Like before recently, like my friends always told me like, "Day, what do you do outside of cybersecurity?" And I was
Yeah.
like, more cybersecurity. But recently, like
Hmm.
I got into jujitsu. I've always played the piano, so that was always something. Working
Yep.
out as well, so that's kind of been my fourth place. Just having a place where I don't have to talk about security.
Hmm.
Even my content is around security, so like I can't even
Yep.
necessarily say like that's a place, but I think that's really good. Like having something outside of what really takes up most of your time,
Hmm.
so you could just like let off steam or whatever the case is to um, have your mind on something else entirely different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as someone who is a hiring manager, I'm sure like now or in the future you'd probably have uh, to hire, yeah,
Hmm.
have people, you're looking for positions, whatever the case is. What what is the best way for someone who's looking for a cybersecurity position to reach out to you or someone at your level, someone who's hiring for a role? What would be the best and most appropriate way to do that? Because I'm sure people
Hmm.
reach out to you like over LinkedIn or Twitter, whatever the
Hmm.
case is, or even reach out to you through other people that know you.
Hmm.
But those might not be like the most appropriate ways, or they might not be doing it appropriately in a way whereby you actually are interested in having a conversation with them. So, what is that? What are you looking for when someone is reaching out to you for a position?
This has been top of mind for me because I recently posted an internship position, and I got a lot of reach out, a lot of engagement on LinkedIn, and I got a few people like messaging me on LinkedIn that I feel like I should have given feedback to them, but I didn't really know them. We weren't connections, so I didn't. But what I think you should do is I think you should approach reaching out to somebody and have a specific goal in mind. If that
Mm,
goal is to engage with me and get me to answer questions, that creates a link in my head to remember who you are, right? But the problem is if the questions are like very basic, or if the questions are self-serving, or if the
mm,
questions force me to do a lot of work, I probably won't do it. And that's just a function of time, and the amount of messages I get. So I got a message today from somebody that says, hey, I want to be your intern, but I can't apply now. Can I apply later? Can you look at my resume? Can you tell me what I need to work on? And can you tell me the best way I can be set up to join Datadog? And it didn't. There's no way I can do that because like
Mm,
I already introduced bias into that equation,
yeah.
and it forces me to like do like a lot of work to answer this question. I got to reach out on Discord for that same internship where person first asked, "Hey, I have some very specific questions to ask you. Is it okay that I can send you some?" I will almost always say yes to that because to me, because they use the word specific, that means they thought about it.
Yeah.
The questions she sent me were amazing. There were 5 questions, and they had everything to do with what's the day to day like? How do you determine projects? How do I know I can be successful? Um, and they were just really well thought out. And they also did their research too with the position, with my history and things like that. And so I took like an hour to answer those questions, but it was because it was actually like a lot of fun answering them, and it was useful for me to answer them because it challenged me in terms of like, am I looking for the right people? And so I sent it back. It was like a big, response on Discord, and they thanked me, and I was like, no, thank you, that was awesome. Thank you for doing all this research. So it was mutually beneficial. So really, what I'm saying is, you reach out to me and it only benefits you. It's not
Mm,
probably going to work. But if you reach out and you make it an engaging conversation, you do your research and you're thoughtful, that makes it great. Another thing too is they sent me a thank you message afterwards.
mm,
And I think I remember when I hired you, you sent a thank you email too. There's
yeah.
something about thank yous that humans really like. I think it's
Hmm.
because the internet we're so not, it's not a very human thing to be on.
Yeah.
And a thank you reminds us like, oh yeah, there's a person at the other end of this and we had a great interaction.
Yeah, no, no, no. I absolutely love that, because I know people. Some people might have the skills or might have, might be even the right candidate, but like that, entry point to even actually having the hiring manager, or you in this case, be interested in having a conversation about the position is really important. And if you, are able to be personable, be able ask the right questions, and like you said, you're not. It's not just like self-serving. Like they also
Hmm.
have something to get out of that because I mean, you're just like the person that's reaching out to you is a stranger on the
Hmm.
internet that you have
Hmm.
no sort of connections with. You don't know anything about this person, so like, and like at the very bare minimum, like why should you even interact with this person? But if they're coming to you in a way that's like, oh, I think this is actually a good interaction, right? And
Hmm.
you're more inclined to actually interact with this person, give them the answers. Same thing with me, like I have people reach out to me all the time, but it's like only certain people that I actually respond to because like
Hmm.
I actually like the question you're asking me. You've done your research, and I think
Hmm.
like I'm happy to even give you feedback or advise you, whatever the case is. And also that thank you message is a magic charm. Like
Yeah.
I after interviews in the past, like I literally got my first internship through that. I literally sent thank you messages to all of my interviewers,
Yep.
because I mean I generally meant it because I appreciate your time to
Hmm.
talking with me and all of that. So I think those are really 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 key points, and I think anyone who's watching this should definitely add that to their arsenal in terms of when they're reaching out to hiring managers or even people on the team. It doesn't have to be someone who is an actual hiring position. It might be
Hmm.
just an engineer on the team who could even be happy to give you a referral, right?
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
think those are really, really good points in regards to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is an element too of just like, people are busy and you shouldn't
Yeah.
get too discouraged if like you don't get a response. I think
Hmm.
that it's okay to check in, but there's also a point where you're just like, maybe this person is just in a busy spot in their life right now. Maybe they're not checking LinkedIn or Discord. Like it shouldn't be the only thing like you should base your whole decision to apply on. But
Yeah.
you know, I I've just started entering this thing in LinkedIn. I'm sure it's a lot more for you where you probably get dozens to hundreds of messages a day,
Yeah.
and you just can't respond to all of them. It's just not physically possible, and
Yeah.
so there's that element too that you shouldn't get discouraged if they don't respond.
Yeah. Totally, totally agree with that. So I know earlier in our conversation, you kind of talked about, the period of your career where you had, the ego and all of that, and how you've learned from that.
Hmm.
But aside from that, are there other invaluable skills you've learned throughout your career? And also, which of these skills did you feel like you should have learned earlier on, rather than waiting to learn them later on? And it could also be technical skills as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I think my foundation and the thing that kind of accelerated me has been always coding, computer programming, as well as networking. Um, so those things have helped me a lot technically. I think the thing that's helped me the most with my career though is the ability to communicate and describe complex problems to somebody that may not understand as much as you about a certain subject. Um, I can get very academic, and I still have problems with this today, where I will go into deep detail about something, describe the history of it, like from then until now, and I do a lot of upfront kind of talking, and I just don't get to the point.
Mm,
So a lot of times you have to put yourself in a position where, like, hey, if I was a salesperson at a company that just got compromised, or I was a business leader and this security analyst is explaining to me how to run my business, like why would I ever listen to them? Learn their language, learn how they speak, learn their problems. If you can frame things in other people's problem space and speak their language, you just take off from there. It's like it really is a cheat code, and it's one of the reasons why I'm getting my MBA. So I did not
mm,
go to get an advanced degree in security. I wanted to go to a top business school. I wanted to get an MBA so I can have those conversations even more with a marketing person, a finance person, a salesperson. Um, and it has paid off really, really well in having
mm.
those conversations.
Yeah, no, that's definitely insight. Very good insight into that. So we've reached the end of this conversation, and
Hmm.
there's a last question I have to ask you, and sort of a curveball question. And I promise
All
it's not
right.
to stroke my ego, but the question is, why did you hire me?
Okay. All right. Well, it's not a curveball question because it's pretty straightforward answer here. I talked about earlier. One thing is culture add. When we were first interviewing you, the one thing I immediately noticed is that you could bring a level of you really could bring a level of making sure someone does their homework when they're looking at a problem. You kind of look at something and say, "Are we looking at everything?
Mm.
Have we considered all the possibilities or solutions?" And I knew that you were that type of thinker because I saw your YouTube channel. I saw your YouTube channel and I was like, oh, this is a person that if we had on the team, if we made any rash decisions or if we did something and went off in a direction, they would be a good grounding force because
Mm,
they did, like, Day does his homework, Day studies, and he makes sure that, like, everything that we do, there's like a really good chance that we're going to achieve it because we're not leaving anything out. So that was like the first thing. I think, also in a culture ad perspective, your YouTube channel, um, I thought it would be an amazing thing to have within our team for folks to go and see, like, hey, I'm gonna, like, what kind of people does Datadog hire? It's really
mm.
hard to do that in an interview loop, and I'm like really proud to say, like, anytime someone asks about Datadog, you're like one of the top links that I give them. Like, just go look at Day. Like, just go look at his TikTok if you want some memes. Go look at his YouTube if you want to learn some stuff. This is the type of thinker and tinkerer that we want. So that's the second thing. I want to say the last thing is just drive. So it's really important that when you're looking for a job in security, that you don't focus on passion. You focus on engagement and drive. And those two things are similar, but they're not one on one overlapping. I would rather you have an engaging day where the work you're working on is interesting. Maybe sometimes it's not interesting. Maybe you're having a bad day. Maybe you're having a good day. What matters is that you're engaged with your team, you're engaged with the problem set, and you really are motivated to solve it. I don't hire passionate people. And the
Mm.
reason is if the business decides to go into another direction and that direction is not your passion, you're done. Like, you're
Yeah.
gonna look for a new job and, like, I've lost you. Like, there's
Mm.
nothing coming back. So um, I think those are really, really important points to hit, and it's what I look for when I hire somebody.
No, that's a really amazing answer. And I think all of these insights and all this perspective is very valuable because, coming from someone with your experience and at your level, this, my subscribers, my viewers can go take all this feedback and apply it, add it as a weapon to their arsenal. And like, they're
Hmm.
in a way better position to like apply for jobs, reach out to people for jobs, and
Hmm.
just, succeed at getting into the industry because that's really the whole point of everything. But
Yeah,
I really, really appreciate you taking your time out of your
of
day
course.
to do this interview, and I really appreciate all the answers, all of it. And I'm super excited for when this comes out because I think it's going to be really, really valuable. But thank you so much for doing this, and
Of
I hope you have
course.
an awesome rest of your day.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, absolutely.
I've always wanted to do this on a YouTube video. If you
Yeah.
haven't liked or subscribed, the button's right down here.
Yes, sir.
Like, comment, and subscribe right here.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely do that. You heard it from him, not me.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, thank
yeah.
you so much. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate this. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.